Hello everybody, welcome back to the James Lawrence Allcott channel and the second episode of Dream Teams. Really excited about this guest that we've got on here. A fountain of knowledge when it comes to football and one team in particular, but surprisingly, there's quite a few players in this dream team that don't come from his beloved Manchester United. Mark Goldbridge joins me right now, mate. I'm really excited to go through this team and figure out why you've chosen a lot of these players, because there are a few players. I was thinking 1 to 11 we're going to go Man United, but it's not been the case. First question for you then. Who were you thinking about when it came to this dream team that hasn't made it onto this list that you're a little bit gutted about?
I think there's a few that as we go through the positions, I'll probably mention them, but two that definitely come to mind. I think probably because I'm a little bit older, certainly than you, and a lot of people will be watching, is that football was very different for me when I was growing up. So I'm as passionate as football as any young person is, but it wasn't as accessible. So I couldn't watch La Liga or I wouldn't know French football or PSG players. I can't even remember who played for Real Madrid in like the late 80s, early 90s. So these players that would be from like World Cups, so they'd be high echelon players of like France and Italy and stuff like that. But Cannavaro, I wasn't a young kid when he was playing. I loved him as a centre back. I nearly put him in. And
why
Zidane
did you love him?
There's just something about. I like Italian defenders anyway. They were, I think if you're going for a defender, a top, and there's not that many good Italian defenders now. Really, when I think about it.
But that was the guarantee, wasn't it? It was that the best defenders were the Italian defenders. More on that in a bit, actually, because we do have an Italian in there. Cannavaro is one that missed out. Cannavaro is like, I loved. He was one who kind of sort of stuck up for the small guys. Like, so he was only
that's it.
Yeah. I loved about him.
Just shows you can be a top-class centre-back without height, which I think people always think you need to have.
Yeah, true. Right, let's get into this then, mate. Because I'm fascinated by your team. It's a 4-3-3 because we did the one last time with Rory, and it was clearly 4-4-2, but we didn't go into as much detail about the formation. And the formation for me, like I said, isn't as important. This series is about players that you cared about and why you cared about, because I think that's what we often forget about nowadays. And I'm sure you probably. It must be tough for you sometimes to kind of look back on players, because it does feel like you're reacting to things week on week, aren't you? So it is about, are you delivering the goods for me now or not? And I guess sometimes you need that little bit of distance to look at some of these players. And there is one player actually later on the list that I think still his legacy is one that has a lot of conversation, and I wonder how it will date as the years go by. But
I think I know who you're talking about there. Hopefully I do anyway.
Yeah, I think you probably do. Right, so let's kick off with your goalkeeper. Who's your goalkeeper, mate?
Yeah, I mean, look, I had a little bit of a think about it because there's been some fantastic goalkeepers, but for me, it is the United connection. But also, I remember the Euros, and I remember 92 quite well when they won the Euros, and 96. 96, he was. I mean, I remember Davor Suker chipping him. I can't remember what ground it was at, but he was just colossal. Peter Schmeichel is the goalkeeper, obviously, but he was just a colossal goalkeeper for Manchester United. But also for a few years in world football, he was the colossal goalkeeper. So much personality, a bit of a hothead as well. And an absolutely fantastic goalkeeper. And yeah, he tarnished it a bit by going to Man City at the end, but he was, of his time, just an elite world-class goalkeeper.
Yeah, totally. Schmeichel's an interesting one here because so you first of all got the quality of him as a goalkeeper. Absolutely. Like, what a goalkeeper. And there was that kind of phrase of, your goalkeeper can get you 10, 15 points. It kind of, in my mind, it kind of started with someone like him. I remember in the mid-90s, I think Schmeichel might have got injured or something like that, and QPR played them at Loftus Road, and Gary Walsh had to go in goal for Man United. And you could see the difference. You were kind of like, we've got a chance here because they've got Gary Walsh in goal instead of Peter Schmeichel. The one thing you did talk about there is like the chips. That was the thing with him, is that he did, as good as he was, He did get chipped like every now and again, didn't he?
He did, and I think that goal does stand out. I mean, he just literally actually owned him, Davor Suker, with that one. It was so good. But no, I think around that time, 96 which was when that happened. But that was the year United had just won the double, and I remember again that was the year that Newcastle were miles ahead and should have won it. And I remember going to Newcastle and we won. I think we won 1-0 at their place. Cantona scored I think it was Cantona that scored, but I know that Schmeichel just had one of those games where it was just like unbelievable. And he's comfortably the best goalkeeper I've ever seen, Schmeichel, to be fair. Unfortunately enough, got to see him most weeks as well.
Yeah. Did you like him though? Do you know what I mean?
I liked him. Yeah, I liked him at Man United. I didn't like him when he left Man United.
Yeah, because I think that's the one thing with Peter Schmeichel and I think his son Casper kind of has that same, maybe not to the same extent, but I've heard a few sort of elements of that kind of that ferociousness, that sort of not win at all costs, but just like the standards. Maybe it's that. That was something I was reading about recently, and actually I was doing a video on Man United and talking about like, are they good or not? I can't figure if they're good or not. And the road that I kind of went down, I was looking at expectations, and what it was suggesting with this was that if you kind of set high standards, you'll almost get dragged up there at some point, right? And I feel like that's what's kind of happening with Man United a little bit. But I think you could say the same about Peter Schmeichel. As much as he wasn't maybe loved as just a kind person, if you know what I mean, the standards that he seemed to set for the back four and the whole team made a massive difference, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think high-end sport, we've seen it with so many people, is that you can have a talent and then you can waste the talent, or you can just be mediocre with the talent, or you can take it to the highest heights. And I think with Schmeichel, he had that arrogance, and you've got to have that, especially as a goalkeeper, and personality. And then you've got the perfect combination. Fantastic goalkeeper with that high opinion of yourself, which he definitely had.
Yeah. I guess it comes to mental. That brings sort of mental strength for him himself. I do remember in 1999. I feel like, I don't know if it was just because he was on his way out. I felt like he was starting to creak a little bit at that point. There were a couple of mistakes there. Despite the great penalty saves against Bergkamp, I did feel like when it was getting to the end of that, it was like, okay, it was probably time for him to move on. But prior to that, unbelievable. And his background actually was in handball. I don't know if you knew this. And so that starfish save kind of came from his previous life as a handball player. Unbelievable goalkeeper. Yeah, did become a bit of a traitor with the Manchester City thing. How did you feel about that when that happened then? If you let it go?
I think in fairness, time's always a great healer with a lot of players, isn't it? As you said, we live in this world now where fantasy football and all that is day to day, and you analyse absolutely everything. And I think some of these players, if they were in the modern day, it'd be interesting because they live off those moments that are not week to week. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I think Schmeichel knew he was coming towards the end of his career in '99 anyway at the highest level, and rather than fade out, he burnt out and he went. The disappointing thing was that he ended up going. I don't know whether he went straight from Man United to Man City.
So he went to Sporting Lisbon, and he had a couple of seasons there. And actually, he won the league for them in the first season back. It was the first time they'd won the league in quite a long time. And then made his way back to Man City and played for Aston Villa as well. Actually, right at the end.
That was disappointing to go to City, but then again, that was in the days before Man City really existed. So it probably only. It wouldn't be like playing for Man City now. In fairness, is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't not the same.
There's a few that kind of got away with it. Andy Cole got away with it as well, didn't he?
Yeah. Because they were shit then before the oil.
Yeah. Right, we move on to a player who's actually he's in the background here. Actually, we could just see him quickly if we want to. Where is he? There he is. Cafu.
Yeah.
Go with Cafu. Why Cafu?
I think right back is not as easy. It's probably the hardest position I had because as much as I like Gary Neville, and I think Gary Neville's a fantastic right back, I just feel that Gary Neville's career was based on ridiculous amount of dedication and hard work. I don't think he was a naturally gifted right back. A fantastic footballer and a real advert for dedication to your sport and hard work. And I think you see that in Gary Neville in real life. He's always up at like 5 o'clock, isn't he, doing Twitter posts and that. And so I wanted to go for somebody who's just, who gets you off the edge of the seat. And what I liked about Cafu, and I even thought about Dani Alves, but what I liked about Cafu is that not only he was a leader, I think he was the captain in 2002, wasn't he, when they won the World Cup? He's got
his World Cup record was ridiculous. So in 1994, he was in that squad. He wasn't always starting, but in the final, I think after about 20 minutes, the fullback, Jorginho, got injured. So Cafu came on in that World Cup final. He played in the 98 World Cup final, because they lost that one to France, and then captained them in 2002, and played in 2006, which was an amazing squad as well. But yeah, 2002, he was the captain of that team. Unbelievable international career that he had.
I think I almost feel he's a bit underrated, underappreciated because I mean, I love Italian football, and obviously he was at AC Milan, so I know a lot about him from that. But even just from his international career, he had an amazing stamina. Defensively, Brazilians, are they really known for being absolutely defensive beasts? And he was, but he also had that ability to get forward and get involved in the attack as well. Obviously, brilliant on the ball. I mean, I think there are a few Brazilians around now, Fred, who you just wonder what's going on with that passport then. But no, absolutely reminds me of, Brazilian fullbacks of, I remember watching, what's his name in that goal they scored against Italy in 1970. Why does his name? Is it Carlos Alberto?
Yeah, Carlos Alberto.
Yeah. Carlos Alberto vibes Cafu. I just think he was definitely the best right back of my life, really.
Yeah. With Cafu, because I thought this, when I saw Cafu, I thought, when you're picking this team, are you going, who's the best? Is that what is important to you? What is important to you?
Not really. I think it's the play. It is got to be a factor, James. Yeah, but I think it's also like you asked me. It's the players that I have an affection towards. So there are a couple I've gone, you're not as good as that player, but I have an affection towards you. And I think people will be saying Cafu's not the best, but I just like that play. If I'm picking a team and who do I like the most, I just think Cafu's going to give me that personality, that leadership, that stamina, that professionalism, and then on top of that, you've got that elite mentality and ability again. So that's why I went for Cafu.
Yeah, totally. I mean, started his career in 1989. Finished in 2008. The longevity is unbelievable. Like I said, without trying to name drop too much, the only reason I'll bring it up again is because he played and the guy was a joke. Physically, I think he was 48 at this stage, and he's ripped. And also, I think something that is actually really important to me. What a lovely smile. Do you know what I mean? Had a kind of had that Brazilian flirty nature, if you know what I mean. Him and Roberto Carlos on the other side, both players that kind of seem to play football with a smile on their face. And his style, I thought, was interesting as well. He was one of those players that, it's almost like a lightning rod if you're thinking about a modern quality right back. You go straight to someone like Cafu and the style of play that he had and the energy that he had, well into his 30s. He won the Serie A with Roma in, I want to say 2000 or 2001, and he was 30 then. So, and he finished when he was 38. Unbelievable.
I think with footballers as well, I don't know how other people look at it or how you look at it. When I watch a player and someone says they're good, one of the first things I notice is I don't even know if it is an attribute. It's almost that their poise on the ball. What's their body shape on a ball? Because I think some players, you'll see them, you go, yeah, they've got no left side at all. They've got nothing on the left. It's all on the right. And I think with Cafu, he's again one of those players that he just has that poise on the ball. It's an equilibrium, a balance of pure class. There's not a weakness to the way he's running or when he's
a grace. Yeah, totally. Great shout with Cafu. Move to midfield. This is really interesting because, of course, when you choose this first centre back, a Man United centre back, and a Man United centre back, and so many great partnerships when it comes to Man United centre backs. Often, if you're going to pick one and you haven't picked the other one, then that other person has to be left out. And so the question that I have to ask is, of course, tell me who you've chosen, but tell me why you haven't chosen the other guy.
I've gone for Vidic, and anyone who watches the United stand knows I'm a massive fan of Vidic. I think, the thing I loved about Vidic is that he wasn't English, and yet he came to the club and ended up being captain. And he got the captaincy because I've never seen anybody who will... I mean, God, I wish he was at United now, because the amount of crosses we concede from and the amount of times we don't attack the second ball or put our body on the line. And he was just unbelievable at attacking the ball at its highest point, which is a goalkeeper or a fan or a manager. It must be just the best thing in the world to know that if that ball comes in at a certain height, nobody's going to get it because he's going to go and win it. And it didn't matter. I don't know how tall Vidic was. I mean, probably 6'2", something like that. But his aerial strength, and look, he was one of those players who just looked like he was made out of granite.
6'3", it says here.
So he was a little bit bigger than I actually thought he was. So, he was tall. But I mean, this is an affection one, really. I just love Vidic. I think he embodies everything I want in a centre-back, really. I mean, look, Ferdinand's got the grace, definitely got the pace. But I think Vidic in a centre-back it's number one for me. It's like, win it, go and win that ball, put yourself about physically and dominate your opposition. And Vidic was superb at that.
I think that's interesting when it comes to centre-backs. And it's going to be interesting to see where, or maybe, you know, say I did one of these with someone who was 21 or 22. I wonder if they would see the centre-back position differently. Because I agree with you. I think there's the players that you really do have that affection for, certainly in the centre-back position. It's that you want that kind of lion-heartedness, if that's a thing, right? You want them to stop goals first, put their head where people don't want to put their feet. And I think that's why I can understand where, you know, like you say, in terms of poise on the ball, or grace, as we've spoken about already, Ferdinand is maybe your guy. Vidic is one where actually it's one of those where probably people like myself, who's not a Man United fan, will forget Vidic. But you as fans, when you're so tensed up because you just want to hang on to that goal in the Champions League quarterfinal or whatever it is, when that cross comes in and you just see a big Serbian head, let's get rid of it and stop goals first, it means the world, right?
Yeah, and I think the centre-back partnership is always about balance. Like, I couldn't put Vidic and John Terry together. I wouldn't put John Terry in there anyway, but you've got to have that balance. And that's why Vidic and Ferdinand work so well, because Ferdinand had the pace and the ability on the ball and the reading of the game, whereas Vidic was just that pure out-and-out centre-back leader, put his head on the end of anything. And I think that, in the modern game, you're right. I think everyone always goes, who's the best Premier League centre-back ever? Is it Vidic is it Van Dijk or is it Ferdinand? And I'm like, well, to be honest, I think John Terry and Vidic are right up there for different reasons, because they're the ones who'd play with I don't think Ferdinand and Van Dijk would be a bad centre-back partnership, but I'd rather see Van Dijk and Vidic, or Ferdinand and Vidic, or Ferdinand and Terry, because I think that you get the all-encompassing skills of a centre-back partnership that way. Yeah,
Vidic, of course, was in that team, 14 consecutive clean sheets, and actually didn't win PFA Player of the Year. There's a bit of talk about it, I mean, on his Wikipedia page, but apparently it'd be interesting to know what you think about this, Mark, because Ryan Giggs won it, on Wikipedia it says it was questioned as a nostalgic exercise, which I think is probably fair, as good as a career as Ryan Giggs had. But Vidic kind of, again, maybe kind of getting a little bit forgotten there because of one or two other people who are just a bit more headline grabbing.
Yeah, definitely. Defenders tend to not get the headlines, do they?
Yeah. Right, move on to your other centre-back. As we said, Rio Ferdinand's not made it on this list, but we go back to another Italian juggernaut. It's Maldini.
Yeah, I mean, Maldini just all through, probably, I'm trying to think when I first would have registered an interest in Maldini, but probably sort of from 1990 onwards, when he was a younger player.
What was your first World Cup?
90. 90 was the first one I remember. So I was very young, but I do remember that one. But yeah, I mean, full ones would have been from sort of 94 really. But Maldini was just always a player when I was growing up that you maybe didn't get to see them much, although they did start to have Channel 4 Italian football. But you always heard about Maldini. And then when you saw him, I just thought he was just almost impregnable as a defender. Just absolutely, and quick as well, but very good on the ball. Wonderful left foot, of course. Very good in the air, and could play left back or left centre back seamlessly. And you think about like the Bareses and the Costa Curtas and that AC Milan defence. It was, and he was a huge part of that. But yeah, I just, Maldini is just, for me, is probably the number one defender when I think of that I really always thought was the best defender in the world. I just think Maldini was just a fantastic class character. And it's interesting when he was at Old Trafford the other week when we played them, and like all the United players were just swarming around him because he's just got that aura about him as well. Yeah,
I mean, 25 seasons all at one club, and that club being AC Milan is incredible in itself. Here's a stat that I didn't know. He's right-footed, and he started as a right back.
I No, and that's ridiculous to say he's one of my favourite defenders of all time. I didn't know he was right-footed. I would have thought he was.
Well, I mean, I didn't as well. Yeah. So there was there was another right back that I think it's Tosotto or something like that player I wasn't too aware of, but he was playing on the right side, and so they moved him over to left back, and he was so two-footed that it never changed. He was able to do whatever he wanted. 25 trophies in that same time. Champions Leagues, the international. That's the sad thing I think with Maldini is he never got that. I mean, was he? I don't know if he'd played in Euro 2000. I think he might have just maybe quit. He might have played in that one, but he certainly obviously didn't play in 2006. And so didn't get that international trophy. A lot of heartbreak there for him. But yeah, I agree with you. My memory of him is Pro Evo 6, I think, and he was like old by this point. But like when you play FIFA or Pro, there's like a force field and like certain players that regardless of their stats, you just can't get past them. And that's what Maldini had. And I think he actually kind of had it in real life, but also had it in the game as well. So that's my one of my big memories from university. I'd always go and get Maldini as soon as I could. Let's go to left back. So Maldini, we kind of needed to move him into centre back, and in his later years, of course, he did play centre back as well. Finished when he was 41 as well. Another one with that longevity, which is mad. Again, another player with longevity as well is your left back, and I sent you a link. I don't know if you were able to see it.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. But
yeah, so you've got with Dennis Irwin as your left back. Again, another player who could play left back or right back. And a massively underrated player actually.
Yeah. I think he's underrated because of time. I think that United had a really good team in sort of mid-90s, certainly 94 with Hughes and Cantona and Ince and Kanchelskis. Roy Keane was just coming into the club, and Dennis Irwin. I mean, Dennis Irwin was there in 99 as well. People sort of don't realise that his longevity at Manchester United. But as you said there, I think he's as good at right back as he was at left back. He got a lot of goals. Very, very difficult opposition to get past. Again, amazing energy. And I don't really know what it is. I don't know whether it's his quiet personality. Although Paul Scholes was quiet and still seems to get a lot. Maybe position. I don't know what it is, but really he should be. When people, it irritates me when people say who's the best left back in the Premier League. You always get Ashley Cole and a couple of others, but Dennis Irwin doesn't get mentioned. And for me, he's maybe because he's Irish. I don't know what it is.
Do you know what I wonder? I think he's unassuming. I think that's the thing for me. And actually watching. So if you go on YouTube, and just type in Dennis Irwin, someone's put a video together of every assist and every goal, and it is fascinating to watch because I remember him as soon as I read Dennis Irwin when you sent me a team. I actually thought about him at Wolves because I remember him. He played for Wolves after you, and I remember thinking, okay, here we go. Man United player leaves Man United, goes to plays for another team, and let's watch him get found out because that's happened time and time again. And I remember watching him and thinking, wow, he's still really good. And I think at that point he was 36. But going back to that video, that what you see which is fascinating and very simple as well, is that, so first of all, in terms of the crosses that he was able to put in, he was able to put crosses in left foot or right foot, but also the crosses that he put in he just hit a great area again and again and again. It wasn't like rapid pace on it. It wasn't, getting to the byline and doing anything. It was just a good cross onto that 6-yard line, and he was able to do it if he was playing right back or he was playing left back. What I thought was interesting in terms of the goals that he scored, people talk about the free kicks a lot of the time, but if you watch that video, the amount of goals that he scores with his right foot as a left back, because he kind of, instead of doing that overlap that, say, a Gary Neville would do, he'd actually just stay a little bit narrower, get the ball on the edge of the box and just wallop it with his right foot. It was really surprising. I was really surprised to see that. And
it's probably another player who's right-footed, left foot strong, isn't he?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I guess that's something that was probably sort of less utilised, less known in terms of the swapping of those kind of players. It's something that you just wouldn't do because you'd be going into trouble. But he was obviously good enough to deal with that or get his positioning right. And his crossing, was absolutely brilliant. Like, so steady for Man United. And again, you talk, longevity. A player like he came from. Where did they get him from? They get him from Oldham in 1990. Yeah, 368 games. I've got him down as 33 goals 456 games. The stats are a bit funny on Wikipedia and then Transfer Market. But 456 games, 33 goals, 23 assists. Yeah, really, really solid and someone who gets forgotten a lot.
Just the passage of time, unfortunately. I think, everyone's obsessed with now, aren't they? And it's like, everything's better than now. But I think if he was a bit of a more boisterous character and he was English, the people wouldn't shut up about him. So
I think, maybe not marketable. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't see him on the front cover of anything because he wasn't bothered about it. One player who absolutely loves him is one of your first three midfielders who is, Captain Fantastic. He's one that okay. Tell me who this player is, and then tell me your thoughts of him, both now and then, because I'm intrigued to know how you feel. Because a lot of these guys become pundits, and then you've got to deal with that as a football fan. Talk us through it, mate.
So Roy Keane is probably my favourite player of my life. Like, I remember, I'm obviously from Nottingham, so I remember him coming through and being sold to United, which was the British record at the time. I think it was 3.5 million, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was so happy because I remember it. I remember, like, I used to deliver papers and I'd always be reading everyone's paper on the back, and it was like, he's going to Blackburn. I was like, I don't really like Blackburn. And then it was like, he went to Manchester United. I was like, oh my God, he's going to Manchester United. Where's he going to get in that team though? Because it was like, and then obviously I think he was playing at right back at start, and
really?
he just forced his way in. Because at Forest, he was a goal scoring midfielder, really. Yeah. And then he just evolved at Manchester United into this, most decorated captain in Premier League history. But really underrated as well, because I think people think about Roy Keane and they just think he's like a hyped up Mark Noble, because he was a captain. But and he was an unbelievable captain. I mean, I would put him in any side. If you want a manager on the pitch, I'd put Roy Keane in it in his prime. But he was a really good player as well. Like Juventus at Turin, 99 semi-final, we were going out, he'd been booked. And to take that on and know that you're not playing in the final, just one of his best performances. I actually think his best performance was a crap FA Cup final against Liverpool in 96. He was just unbelievable in that final as well, which was 3 years before. But I just loved, I loved his leadership, his engine, his tenacity. I mean, what he did to Haaland was out of order, but you can't tame that sort of player, and you don't want to. I think Rooney had the captaincy given to him at United and it tamed him. And I think Roy Keane was never to be tamed, standing on goalkeepers, getting into fights with people. And if he's your player, you love it. If a rival is going to hate him. So
because if he's your player, it's an advantage. If he's their player, it's unfair, isn't it? Yeah. It's interesting, Roy Keane as well, because actually, like you say, people forget how good he was on the ball and how he was actually the metronome for that team before Scholes kind of dropped in and became that quarterback. He was right at the start of his career, Paul Scholes, he was a forward. And so when he played at sort of centre midfield with Roy Keane in that unbelievable four, where you had Beckham and Giggs, and you had a dribbler, you had a crosser, and then you had those two midfielders. Roy Keane would get forward a little bit. And that calmed down as the injuries hit a little bit. But Paul Scholes was the guy who got in the box and scored the goals, didn't he? So Roy Keane actually had to just recycle play a lot of the time. And that, I think you're right, that kind of gets forgotten about. What do you think about him now then? How do you feel about him now?
I think that I have a rule, really. I think just because you are a great footballer doesn't mean I have to respect your opinion as a pundit. And I think that's, as somebody who talks about football a lot, I implore people not to respect my opinion, because the whole point is that as long as I'm generating conversation, that's fine. I don't care whether people agree with me or not. So I go into it and I'll go, well, look, I love Roy Keane, I love Gary Neville, I love Paul Scholes, but they do talk a lot of shit. So yeah, they do, because I think that's the brilliant thing about football is it's a great leveler. Once you hang your boots up, you have respect for what you did, and oh my God, they deserve respect. But if I sit down in a pub and they tell me that I don't know, Bruno Fernandes is just a Portuguese James Maddison or something like that, I'm not going to sit there and go, "It's fine, Roy, you're a legend, I'll get you a beer." I'm going to, no, sorry, I don't agree with you on that one. And don't start getting all your medals out, because that's what you did on the pitch. Your opinion is your opinion. And some people have turned against Keane, I think, because of it, because he's very bitter. He's been treated very badly by Manchester United because of the fallout with Sir Alex. He wasn't even invited to the 20-year anniversary of '99, which is basically because of him. So there is that there, which I think is very sad.
And unnecessary, isn't it? It's weird. Again, you say, what works for you in the confines of a football pitch? For example, that bitterness, that he had for Haaland isn't going to continue to work when you've finished, and that bitterness is hurting him a little bit, because that's that's unnecessary. What's happened there, and as time passes by, let it go, right? So I was intrigued to know what you think about that, because I've seen him linked with a couple of teams recently in terms of management again, and I'm like, who's going to him to be a manager now? I don't understand how that could be, because I think he's proven
football's changed, hasn't it, as well? You can't just
you can't just
he had a lot of bad feedback from Ireland, didn't he, as well? So
yeah, exactly. So Roy Keane, and again, I think the last thing I want to say about Roy Keane is kind of got that Schmeichel vibe in terms of it's about the standards, right? And so you love having him, but maybe the same kind of love is maybe not there. 7 red cards for Man United in this time. We move on. So 3 in the midfield. Who's your second midfielder?
I think I went with David Beckham. And a lot of this is to do with the love for the player. I mean, I remember, God, how old would I have been? So 98 World Cup. I'd have been sort of late teens, mid to late teens. And I remember him being sent off for England, and he got absolutely panned. Everybody hated him. I remember being down the pub or at college and just getting into arguments. I was just like, Simeone's an absolute CUNT for what he did. All he's done is kicked out. Well, he shouldn't have done it. I said, well, if you've been on the football, and this is obviously something in me, I've done that. I mean, I played a game against Football Daily and chucked a ball at someone's head after a bad tackle. If people don't get it, they think you're a villain. But if you've got that in you, I suppose a bit like Roy Keane, I'm not someone who's starting a fight in Tesco, but when I'm on the football pitch,
I know
it's a competitive world, and you will do things that are just regrettable. But in the moment, I totally understood why Beckham kicked out at Simeone.
Yeah.
It was
naive, wasn't it, as well? Simeone,
petulant.
Yeah, and Simeone. That's interesting. Going on from the Roy Keane thing, is that sort of that shithousery that Simeone put within his football has worked as a manager. He's been able to take it out of the confines of that and put it on the other side. But Beckham, again, another one of those players who I feel like he was naive in that moment. But that said, he did have that edge to him. He did have that little edge to him. I think we saw it. Was it the World Club?
Yeah, he got sent off there. Yeah,
he just stuck the leg out, didn't he? He just went bosh on someone out there for no reason at all. So he did play on the edge.
To be honest, I love David Beckham as a player. I think that probably underrated because of his off-field antics in relation to being, very successful. Very, very successful off the field. But
how did you feel about that at the time? Were you because it got to a point where it felt like it was kind of Fergie versus Beckham. Of course, Fergie won it. Were you kind of can you just stop going to premieres and just? Do you know what I mean?
It's a great point, because it's always the thing I use with fans today, because I'm a little bit older. You get these fans who love Lingard and Pogba for all the stuff they do, the commercial stuff. And I look at it now and I go, no, they should be focusing on their football. But then a little light will go and go, I never had a problem with David Beckham, and yet he's walking around in a sarong and he's hanging around with the Spice Girls. Now, if that was an equivalent footballer doing that, if Mason Greenwood's going out with someone from Little Mix wearing a sk now, imagine what that would be like.
Yeah. So Paul Pogba, Paul Pogba's an example. Everyone's just stop Instagram, stop dancing, crack on with your football. And actually, I guess the point you could make with Beckham, if you want to, is regardless of what he was doing, what he was endorsing, where he was on the pitch, he was so consistent, wasn't he?
Yeah, definitely. And it never bothered me, and it never bothered me because I just worshipped him as a player. And his ball delivery was just on a different level. He probably should have come into the midfield sooner than he did, because I know he did that later in his career when he went to Milan and PSG. But he just couldn't get in that midfield with Keane and Scholes in there. But as a right winger, he couldn't really beat a man, but he didn't need to. The worst thing you could do with Beckham is give him 1 meter, and the crossing was just you talk about right areas, but the whip on it to put it into the right area, it was unbelievably difficult to deal with. And I just think he's probably got the best right foot in English football for the last 30 years. I just think it was just unbelievable.
I agree with you. I think full stop. Like, I think if you often I would go, if you watch a compilation of David Beckham's crosses, and there was a hot spot as well for him, because I think he did lose a little bit of he had unbelievable stamina, which was enough as a right winger. Like you say, never had that out and out pace. But he probably lost even a yard after that once he went to maybe Real Madrid after being in a couple of seasons. But that 1998-99 season, where I think he got 18 assists or something ridiculous, if you pause, when the ball gets to him, if you pause it and draw a line as to where you would like the ball to go, it was where he put it. It was unbelievable. I saw him, I coached for MLS, when was it? Like 2006. So it was his last season at Real Madrid. And it was actually a season where he overcame quite a few struggles. One with McLaren in terms of coming back, of course, that sending off for England in 1998 as well. But Real Madrid, he got cast aside in one of his last seasons, and then came back and was unbelievable for them again in winning the title back for them before he went to LA Galaxy. But in that, I watched a friendly, Real Salt Lake played them, and I just watched him. And what was amazing was you sort of blink and he's back in the four defensively, and then they got the ball, then you blink and then he's already in the exact position that he would want to be to cross the ball. Like, his positioning was so good that once he then did get the ball, he didn't need to beat a man again, like regardless of being 31, 32, 33, whatever it would be, because he was just his ability, like you say, with that wand of a right foot to curl the ball into the area that he wanted was just unbelievable. He is a really fascinating player because you were always waiting for it to, him to lose focus, but somehow he just didn't.
I think if he didn't have the off-field stuff, his career is just unbelievable. Like, it's such an amazing story.
So many chapters to it as well, right?
Yeah, and I think also it's I've read some really good autobiographies, but the Beckham ones are hard to read because it's all about, he's so commercial. But if he didn't have all that, his career would be unbelievable. Also, I'd say, is he not arguably the best England captain since Bobby Moore? So Bobby Moore, because I remember watching the 2002 game against Greece, and there was a lot of good players on that pitch who just bottled it. We'd won in Germany, and we needed to beat Greece at Old Trafford. That, to me, is his best England game I've ever seen. It was just unbelievable. He was everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know what his position was because he was everywhere.
I remember it was superhuman. It was totally superhuman because you're right. Gerrard, dropped a bollock. Paul Scholes was absolutely terrible in that game. Absolutely terrible in that game when they needed it. All we needed was a draw. That's what's weird about it. It's like, that goal was to get a draw, but he literally... He wouldn't take no for an answer. It was superhuman. I remember that game, and it felt like it had gone away. And then, of course, it goes and scores that. One
of the few players that actually took playing for England personally and actually, probably sometimes exceeded his club form.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that's why people loved him as well, was that he playing for England mattered so much, and you saw that not in his words but in his performances. Because as a captain, he did always kind of step up. I mean, it maybe hurt England a little bit in hindsight, because they found a way to keep him in the team because he kept delivering for them instead of maybe finding a way that would have worked better for everyone. But an unbelievable captain for England. You're absolutely right. And so many caps for England as well. So one more midfielder. And
this is a controversial one.
This is a controversial one. I was surprised by this one. And this is one where you had a couple was it two you were thinking about? You couldn't decide on which one. Who did you go for?
Well, I was going to go with Zidane, because Zidane is a player that I've always liked, even from playing sensible soccer all those years ago. I'd always buy him from Bordeaux. I think he was at Bordeaux, and he was just one of those players in the game that the coders had obviously got right. There was like John Collins from Celtic and Zidane from Bordeaux, but if you got them, they just... sensible soccer was hard anyway. The ball would just roll off, but they were like magnets. You could just run through everybody. So I've always liked Zidane, and obviously I liked Zidane before he went on to be the Juventus star in Real Madrid. So I always knew about Zidane, and I thank Sensible Soccer and Championship Manager for that. But and there's no doubt that Zidane is probably the best midfielder I've ever seen. just an unbelievable magnet ability on the ball and dribbling and strength and finishing. But I went for Gascoigne. I went for Gascoigne because I was very young when I watched Italia 90. And again, I think maybe the footage isn't as easily accessible as it is these days. But Gascoigne was a player that would, and I really wish Pogba had done this more for United, because I think he's one of the few midfielders that can do it. When you pick the ball up in the centre circle and run past the player, you mess up any tactical setup, because if you go past the man that's marking you, someone's got to come to get you, which means they leave somebody else. And Gascoigne was brilliant at that. He could pick the ball up in the centre circle, he'd go past one, go past two. Someone's got to come to him and he'll play Lineker in or something like that. Or he'll go all the way himself. And he just messed his career up. I think I always like a tragedy in footballing careers. And that 91
Why do you like a tragedy?
Because I just think that those... I don't know. I like Netflix series like that. I like films like that. I just like a flawed hero, really.
Sure, yeah.
And it's like George Best. You know, George Best was a flawed hero because his career was over in his mid-20s, which is just unbelievable. Yeah. But Gascoigne, I watched that final between Forest and Spurs on the telly, and he was wild. And I was very young at the time. I was like, why is he on the pitch? I mean, red cards, you didn't really get them for that, but he did one on, I think it was Gary Parker. He put his studs up and basically left an imprint.
Oh, was it not Gary Charles? The one we got?
Yeah, we did. Well, he did one just before that.
Oh, right.
And he should have been booked. And I don't think he got booked. And I always think that referee, Roger Milford, I think his name was. And I think if you'd booked him for that, would he have done that Gary Charles one? Because it was almost like he was on something in that final. He didn't need to do that. You know, you're not Vinnie Jones, you're Paul Gascoigne. And he was flying it. And he probably should have had 2 red cards, definitely the Gary Charles one. And he still came back from that. I mean, Euro 96, he was still good. But I think that injury, and obviously his off-field antics with the drink, is such a shame, because if he'd had that mentality of a Zidane or someone like that, I think he would have been probably easily England's best ever player. He was so talented.
Yeah, I think that's that cup final, from what I've read about it, I think he was just too up for the game. And for someone who was so, I'm going to use the word erratic, but erratic in terms of their sort of energy levels, you know, that game was almost too much, you know, and he was just, because it was supposed to be his final, wasn't it? You know, he'd scored that goal in the FA Cup semi-final, and it was.
That free kick was unbelievable as well. Every time I watch that, I'm like, how do you beat Seaman from there like that? It's just unbelievable distance.
An amazing player. Also read an article recently about his time at Burnley, because he went to, you say, kind of, you know, the Zenith was Spurs, Lazio, just constant problems. You know, if you think he was there for 3 seasons, 43 games. 6 goals. Then Rangers was able to kind of revive his career, but then after that it was Middlesbrough, Everton, Burnley. It just slowly got kind of worse and worse and I think Rangers in particular, that's where his drinking really kind of got out of hand, and therefore his career kind of dropped off from there. And I was reading an article recently about I think it was in The Athletic, about his time at Burnley, and just once again, just like, even in that, he was there for I think a month, and he was just sort of mentally kind of crippled by the fact that he was aging, and just such a vulnerable person. It's unbelievable that as talented as he was, even at that stage for Burnley, age was kind of catching up with him a little bit. And then I think there was a game where he made one bad pass and therefore then kind of drifted into that quicksand. And I think that's the one difference that you see with him that I think people love about him, but also hurt him was that sort of the mental vulnerability that he had, that the top players have that confidence in themselves to kind of to push through any kind of adversity at all. I think
when I think of Gascoigne, is just, I think that how did he become a player that's doing Cruyff turns in a World Cup? How did he become a player that's running past 3 or 4 players? He's a working class lad from Newcastle, and he had, you know, if for anybody out there, Messi's the same. There are some people who are just, George Best was the same as well. You are just born with a God-given talent, and Gascoigne was born with a God-given talent. And it's so sad because you listen to him now, And he's one player who is just a child. Like, he can't deal with the fact that his career is over, because that's what he was put on this planet to do. And to have that ravaged by injury is just so sad, because I wish he'd come to United. I'd love to have seen Sir Alex Ferguson get hold of him, because I think he needed the right people around him. But even then, I think he's just a personality that was just going to self-combust, really.
Yeah.
And
I think
what a player. What a player.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It's that, it's the understanding, I think, and I know he had some, real trauma when he was younger as well, about, I think one of his childhood friends got hit by a car and died and things like that. And that obviously was real trauma for him. And so I wonder if that 1990, there was just such exuberance because he didn't have to worry about being mortal, at being the end. It's like, this is it forever, right? I'm going to live like this forever. And then with that injury, or those subsequent injuries as well at Lazio, he realised he wasn't, and couldn't, and it feels like he couldn't cope with that. And
I think he's another advert of, you get a bad injury and you lose a yard of pace, and he's an injection player. It's like Messi now. Messi's lost that ability to run past 4 or 5 players because they're catching up with him. He's still an amazing footballer, but and he will adapt. We've seen players do that, but I think Gascoigne lost that yard of pace too soon, and it's like, I'm having to adapt into the latter age of my career, in the prime of my career.
Yeah. But look, it shows your love for him. Like, again, that's we've done 2 episodes of this, and go check out the episode with Rory. He put Gazza in as well, so I think that says a lot. Right, front 3. This is one hell of a front 3. Let's start off on the left, because I needed to find out how you work this formation. You put it's the controversial one we were talking about at the start.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I've got Wayne Rooney in there. Again, I think this might be an age thing, because I do remember Rooney. I don't really, the Everton goal that he scored against Arsenal. I'm like, yeah, it was a good goal, but everyone else just goes on about that. For me, it was the 2004 Euros where he absolutely slaughtered France. And we still lost that game, but he was just brilliant. And then he came to United, and he was just Ronaldo was there as well, but Rooney was just amazing, especially the first few years at Manchester United. You talk about Pro Evo. I remember I had a Pro Evo probably around 2005 or 2006, and he got better, and he was already good.
Pro Evo 8, I think it was, yeah.
He got better and better with every season you played, because they had the development, and it was just... Right. He had an amazing shot, but he could run at people. He was quick. He was skillful. And then he had that fire in him that was just ridiculous. And I think in his latter career, he had to adjust because of Ronaldo. You've got a choice. Am I building my team around Ronaldo or Rooney? And it had to be Ronaldo. But Rooney was still a huge part of it. Ronaldo, he had a great season in 11. I think he got injured against Bayern Munich as well, and he scored a load of goals. And then then it just fell off with Rooney towards the end.
Yeah, I've got his goals in front of me now, and it is interesting this season. I mean, he continued to score goals. That's what I did want to ask you about Rooney. Was someone who's watching Man United, constantly. Was there a season where it kind of started to sort of drop back? Because the goals 2011, he obviously had a great, season after season he's always scoring over 15 goals. It's unbelievable. 2004, I'll just go through the years: 17, 19, 23, 18, 20, 34 in 2009, 2010, where he was superb. 16 the season after that, 34 in 2011, 2012, and that final season with Fergie, 2012, 2013, just 16 goals, which is interesting, from 37 games. Maybe that's because Van Persie was a sort of the guy who finished off the goals. And then after that, he does score goals. He scores 19, 14, 15, drops down to 8 in his last season at Man United. But was there a moment where you could see, do you know what I mean? Is there that moment of realisation that, okay, he's not the same Rooney?
Well, I think, in life, it's like Game of Thrones, isn't it? I love Game of Thrones, but it fell away. And, I didn't like the last season. And I think Rooney is a legend for me, and he's in my all-time 11, isn't he?
Yeah.
But he fell away. I think the season Van Persie came in, I don't remember the specifics, but I know he was going to get sold that summer, and then Sir Alex Ferguson retired, and he managed to stay under Moyes. And he was gone that summer. And he was benched a few times.
What do you mean by that when you say he was gone?
He was gone. I think Sir Alex Ferguson had enough. Rooney had enough, and it was bye-bye. I think that season we won the title. Rooney didn't really have a good season. Right. I mean, he had that great assist for Van Persie, but a couple of years before that, there'd been the whole "I'm going to leave anyway," and I think that had been said again, and there was rumours about that, and it was time to part ways. And then Sir Alex Ferguson went, Rooney stayed, but by those last few years of Rooney, they weren't really Rooney. They were the decline of Rooney, and that was at United. We've been spoiled that a player will get out when they know it. It's like Gary Neville playing against Stoke, and he basically retired on the pitch. Like it was like I'm not good enough anymore.
Yeah.
I think Rooney just carried on a little bit too long. He's still got the goals. He's still a quality player, but yeah.
Coming back to something I spoke about earlier, which was the standard bearing, right? And I think that's kind of seems filtered through your team here. You know, Schmeichel, Keane, Beckham with that substance as well. Vidic with that substance as well. Do you think that for a player do you think that Wayne Rooney would have had the decline wouldn't have been so great, and we wouldn't be talking about him in the same way if the standards that were just naturally set without thinking about under Fergie had continued, if he'd had a couple more seasons? Because it does feel like there's a bit of a coincidence between this impenetrable Fergie era and then, you saw it the next season with David Moyes. The standards weren't at the same level. Do you think there's anything in that, or do you just think physically there was just this, he'd ripened and that was it?
I think it's a good point, because there's a definite drop-off from United when Sir Alex Ferguson retires. I think physically Rooney was going to drop off in the late 20s anyway. He'd played a lot of football. Did he look after his body the same way as someone like a Ronaldo? No, he didn't, but who does? And he was definitely slowing down. I don't think the captaincy helped him either. I can't remember what year he got the captaincy. I think he maybe having kids. The fire seemed to go out from Rooney at Manchester United compared to his first few years, where he was just tempestuous and everywhere. His game slowed down, whether it's because of the change in the club, whether it's because of his age, whether it's because of responsibility on and off the pitch. But the fire seemed to go out, and that's understandable. He'd won most things already. Yeah. But I think what you said at the start is interesting, because it does taint his legacy. There are people that will say that Rooney's not a legend, he's a great. And I think even I was saying that when he was still at the club towards the end. But since he's gone, for me, there's no debate that he's a United legend. I just think things he did have tainted him a little bit, maybe asking for a move, even though in hindsight he's probably right. We weren't spending money under the Glazers, and we still don't spend it now in the way that it should do. But he's 100%. He's a legend of Manchester United, and I think time will be kind on him. I think the longer
do you? That's because I guess I feel like when I'm talking about football, so much more now, it's about the records, it's about the numbers and how many goals did he score, blah blah blah. How many trophies did he win? Like I was on the kickoff recently, and they were talking about Harry Kane and the decisions he needs to make, and it was always across the table. It was like, well, he has to go for his legacy, and I was thinking, does he?
Bit late.
But it does seem, think about Haaland and Mbappe, think about these players. It does seem like a really important thing for them, and that's why I wonder if that will be kind to Rooney. I guess the problem is
Rooney's United's all-time scorer and England's.
That's it. Well, and I think it's
almost a secondary thing, isn't it? But it's actually quite a big thing.
Yeah, I think 120 caps. I think he's got for England.
It
is outrageous. It's funny. It's funny how that feeling around him is not as strong as with other players. It's weird.
I think at United, if he'd come through the youth setup, it'd be very different. If he was a Manchester lad, it'd be very different.
Yes.
Sometimes it doesn't mean you have to be, because like Roy Keane is a massive legend of the club. David Beckham is a massive legend. So you don't have to be from the youth or from Manchester. But
just
with Rooney, there's a bit of I don't know what it is. There's just a bit of a detachment towards Rooney. And he's Evertonian, so it's not like he likes Liverpool. But there's just something there that but I think time will be kinder on him.
Let me know in the comments, guys, on Wayne Rooney. I'm fascinated to know how people feel about it, especially Man United fans. Let me know what you think about him and your feelings for him, because I think that's the bit important thing with this series, is that often it's about just how you feel. There's not a right or a wrong. Let's keep moving, though, mate. We've got two more. So Rooney's on the left-hand side. Who's on the right-hand side?
Easy, Ronaldo. and not, obviously a lot of his career has not been at Manchester United, so it's not about that. I mean, I'm a Ronaldo over Messi person because as much as I think Messi is a God-given talent, I think Ronaldo is a prime example of, you can be one of the world's best players through sheer determination. I mean, he's talented. He's not as talented as Messi, but I think he's so focused and he's so driven. And I also like, what I like about Ronaldo is that there's, he's got the physique as well. He's got the height, but he's also had the pace, the skill, the finishing. I mean, look, they're two, when I say I'm Ronaldo over Messi, if you push me, I am. But I don't like to separate because I just think we're so blessed to have those two players. So Ronaldo for me, he's in there. He is a United legend, even though he was only there for a few years. What he did at Real Madrid was just unbelievable. Nash for Portugal as well. The way he conducts himself off the pitch. I don't know the guy. I've never met him. I just think he's a fantastic role model in the modern game. I think he's a fantastic footballer, obviously. And I think it's just sad that he's coming towards the end of his career because you just want it to go on and on and on. I just think he's... And
that's a great question because it's going to be fascinating to see how long it will go on and on and on. I'm a Messi guy. I've never hidden that fact. But I did wonder a few years ago that, again, looking at the numbers, looking at the trophies... 170 games for Portugal, 102 goals at the moment, 770 goals apparently, official goals in his career, over 1,000 games. He's a machine. He's an absolute machine, and you have to applaud that. And that is the difference between Messi. I think you put it really well there. I think Messi's more talented, but Ronaldo to get so much out of his talent, both physically, mentally, I think as well. Is huge, and I completely understand why he's in your list. And although he's so clinical for so many different teams, in terms of, I don't know if this will make sense or if you'll agree with this, but in terms of dragging a team, I feel like with Manchester United, maybe in those last two seasons, maybe with him, and I can't remember which one in particular, if it was the first one, second to last, or the last one, he really did drag that United team to that title a little bit.
Well, he's playing off the wing as well,
as like a Cantona had done back in '96 for me.
I think the genius of Ronaldo is the fact that Messi is the better player. I've always said that, but I prefer Ronaldo. So I'm not saying he's better than Messi. I'm just saying that I prefer Ronaldo. But the genius of Ronaldo is that he's been able to go toe to toe with a player that should have been the best player in the world for the last 20 years on his own by a very long way. And the fact that Ronaldo gets into the conversation shows you what he's achieved, because nobody should be close to Messi, and Ronaldo actually is. But you're right. No, the season, I mean, it's always difficult, isn't it? I mean, Messi's been surrounded by great players, and now towards the back end of his career, he probably isn't. And it's getting harder because, his talent is dropping, as it naturally will. Ronaldo's career after leaving Man United, especially at Madrid, you're surrounded by great players, so you're not having to drag a team as much. But there was a time, to dominate English football is very difficult, even whether you've got Vidic and Rio and Rooney. But there was a season where, I remember a goal against Fulham from the wing, specifically at Craven Cottage. But he was scoring like 40 goals off the wing. Like he wasn't the number 9 at United. He was a winger. That's where he used to play. And yet he was scoring those goals. And like when you're a winger, we all know it. It's like, he's on the right wing or he's on the left wing. Double up on him, swamp him. So as a forward, you've got a whole pitch to move around in, really. As a winger, you're right, you can swap wings, but you're still on the wing. And he was unbelievably prolific for Manchester United. And I think that I like Ronaldo the winger more than I like Ronaldo the number 9, which is basically become. I just think wingers are. Well, that's where Messi is as well.
When you talk about these, like we've said about this, and this I think is going to be a continuing theme with all of these chapters in players' careers. Like. The Real Madrid chapter, the amount of goals to games that he's scoring is absolutely lethal. But if you rewind, he's known as this clinical guy. He came to Man United as the opposite. He was the luxury player. He was so frustrating because he wouldn't just pass the ball. I remember he was. I think it was Wigan in a League Cup final where he kind of came on and destroyed Wigan, to be honest. But I don't think he might not have started that game, or he wasn't starting in general at that period of time because the output wasn't there. Can you remember, like we were talking about Rooney the other way, can you remember a moment where where the switch kind of clicked and you were like, hang on a minute, we've got a different Ronaldo here?
I think it was 2006, wasn't it? The incident in the World Cup with Rooney. And it was very similar to what happened with Beckham in 98, where they were, the English media went in on him. And I don't know whether you'd like to think Sir Alex Ferguson took him aside and said, look, what we're going to do this season is we're going to get our head down and we're going to prove every one of these twats on these papers what a great player you are. And it worked with Beckham. And I think Ronaldo came back and it was the wink after the Rooney sending off. And basically from then until he left, I think it was 2009 he left. For those 3 years, he just became this, like you say, the first couple of years at United, it was like brilliant raw talent, but you never knew what you were going to get. Like a lot of wingers, I like that. And then he just came back from that World Cup and sort of, it was almost like he was going to prove everybody wrong. And he did. And he just found that unbelievable level of consistency, which for a winger is quite rare. The sad thing was he was a bloody boyhood Real Madrid fan, because if he'd stayed at United for 10 years, I think we would have won a lot more Champions Leagues than we've got. I think he's that good.
Maybe it's interesting how you leave is really important, because maybe that's the thing with Ronaldo, that despite not putting the same amount of miles on the clock as Rooney did, Rooney left with a whimper, whereas Ronaldo, like Fergie said, give me one more year, and he did, and then he let him go with his blessing. Maybe that's the kind of difference. It is important how you leave these football clubs. It's interesting.
Well, the year before there was some rumour about him being treated like a slave or something like that. I remember it at the time, and it's like, it's a little bit more than Rooney saying I'm going because you're not buying players. But Ronaldo is held up as this
good guy.
legend, which he was. He was.
And again, look, another player. This is what I like. I like finding out, like, what are you looking for in your teams? Another player with high standards. Another player just so clinical. And you think of the amount of Champions Leagues he's won, like you said, the trophies he's won, the records that he wants and has got. It's again down to holding really high standards. And I think that's part of the success that I guess you've been able to enjoy as a Man United fan for such a long time. Final player. Oh, I'm so pleased you picked this guy. Tell us about your final pick.
And it's another Ronaldo, but I've gone for Ronaldo 9 from Brazil. I mean, look, it's weird not to put Messi in, to be fair, but I don't really have an affection to Messi that's the same as these players that I've picked. I like him. I think I think he is the world's best player, but I'm not a big fan of Barcelona. I don't really like Argentina that much. And he's only ever played in La Liga. So Messi is one of those players that I know is the best, but I sort of admire him from a not an affectionate way. I've just never really had that relationship with Messi. Yeah. But with Ronaldo, I mean, look, you're talking late 90s here, was the best player in the world, the Nike adverts, everything. And I do remember the 98 World Cup. It was very sad. And the more you hear about that now, about the fact that he probably never should have played in that final. But at the time, I remember being down the local pub and it's, he's got to play, because I wanted Brazil to win. Yeah. And it was very, very sad. But again, a player that's slightly plagued by injury, but even as far back as PSV to Barcelona, and then as Inter Milan, and just unbelievable footballer who, for a number 9, is quite different, because I did think about, wow, should I put an Alan Shearer in there? And I was like, of course not, because Ronaldo's scoring capabilities were better than Shearer, but he was also a player that you give him the ball and he run past 3 players. Yeah. Like it's just a different type of number 9 that you probably you don't get number 9s like that. You don't get number 9s like that.
I think when you picked him and then I sort of thought about him, like the most complete striker, I would say. Look, Pele, completely different time, so I'm not going to put him in this. The most complete striker of all time in my head, as a through the middle, complete forward, getting on the ball, and obviously he probably turned more into a Alan Shearer player of sorts after the cruciate ligament injuries at Inter Milan, and actually almost like before he even kind of, I think, went to Real Madrid. Real Madrid, like his goal scoring record, 104 goals in 177 games for Real Madrid, 59 in 99 for Inter Milan. Barcelona, 47 in 49 games. I think Barcelona and Inter Milan I think that's when he was at his absolute peak. And
I don't really remember his Madrid, you know. I mean, it's only I knew he played for Madrid, but it's only when you bring it up there that's I go, oh yeah, Madrid, because I don't think of Ronaldo as Madrid. I don't think that's his best at all. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. He was sort of another one of those Galacticos. Of course, 2002, people talk about him, and that was his tournament. And prior to that, he barely played. I don't think he played in any of the qualifiers for Brazil, and then got to the tournament. And really, that Brazil team, in what was actually, the more I think about, was actually quite a weak World Cup.
We should have knocked them out.
Yeah. Apart from them, there weren't, the German team that got to the final were bad. Turkey were in the semi-finals. It wasn't a good tournament.
The final was the quarter-final, England against Brazil. We should have won it. But...
Yeah, I agree with you. But 1998, I think the way that people are looking at Haaland now, Haaland's probably one of the few players I can kind of, it's similar, but Haaland's hold-up play is not on a different, like Ronaldo's hold-up play is on a different level. And going into that 1998 World Cup, the mystique around Brazil that I think, again, maybe younger people don't have that same glow around Brazil because of the 7-1 and things like that. But 1994 and how they played and how good they were in that tournament, being champions, and then going into 1998, like you say, the advert, the kit, the team, and do you know what? The boots, those R9 boots were just stunning. They were so good. And he was just so, like you look at Maradona in 86 or Pele in 1970, in certain World Cups, or maybe even you think about Neymar maybe in 2014, and they were hoping that he would be that guy. Ronaldo in 98 was just on a different planet at that stage of his career, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I think Brazil have had some fantastic players in my lifetime. I mean, I really liked Romario in 94. I thought he was a really good striker. You mentioned Neymar, Ronaldinho. But Ronaldo 9 is the best Brazilian I've seen. And you talk about his control, you're correct. But it was that ability to control, turn and run at somebody. And Haaland's very good, but he's never going to be a turn and take somebody on player. He might knock it past them and sprint. But as I said, I think that you talk about complete striker and you're absolutely spot on. It's that ability to do it on your own. Almost nothing like Messi, but could do what Messi can do. He could go past 2 or 3 players if he wanted to do it with his back to goal from midpoint in their half. And
unbelievable.
Yeah,
great
bit set up by injury, but yeah. And again, does he get the recognition he deserves? It was only 20 years ago.
That's it. I think it's how it ends a lot of the time. Like, I remember in 2006, and they had all these unbelievable players like Rivaldo, Ronaldinho, Adriano, Carlos, Cafu on the other side. So many great players. I remember that 2006 World Cup. He was a little bit spent, if you know what I mean. He was sort of just trotting about and allowing the fact that he was so many levels above in terms of his finishing ability and a quick feet, but from a standing point, that he was still able to kind of score these goals in these different games. But I do remember watching him thinking, he's walking here. Injuries had really, really hurt him. And it feels like the 90s that happened for quite a few players. I think players are being better taken care of maybe nowadays. If you think of like Michael Owen, a similar kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and also I think a bit like Rooney, naturally probably carried a bit of weight. So, you get to that top level. Have you got that? And you've had the injuries and you're so good. Are you the same as you were at the start of your career? No, of course you're not. You're not going to be that.
What
hungry.
Can you do? You can't reverse it. Good use of the word hungry. Right, so that is a stunning team, an unbelievable team. A question that I asked Rory at the end of the last one, I'm going to ask you as well. And actually, I'm going to ask you, because I think it's going to have to be 2 questions here, because I think the first one's going to be too easy. First of all, this is probably obvious, and you don't need to go into it for too much. Who's your manager?
Yeah, I'm going to... Greatest sports manager, Sir Alex Ferguson for me, yeah.
So the second question, just to make
I think you'd do well with that team as well. You'd do very well with that team.
Fine. Yeah.
I think I'd do well with that team.
Yeah, I think you'd be fine. And so second question, because I think it was so obvious that it was going to be Fergie. If it can't be Fergie, who would be the manager?
Ooh, you know what? Nostalgia again. He's one of my favourite managers, and he did manage, and Ronaldo 9 loved him. Bobby Robson, and Gaza loved him as well. So I loved Bobby Robson. I thought Italian 90. I thought he was so badly treated by the English press, And what a career as well. I mean, look, people think he's just a guy who forgot people's names, but he managed Ipswich Town early in his career, and they I think they won a European trophy.
Yeah, they did, UEFA Cup.
England was an up and down ride. PSV, he managed them. Barcelona, I think he managed Sporting Lisbon. I mean, this is just a northeast lad who, you know, went and managed. You don't get managers doing this, not English managers. So yeah, I think I'll go for Bobby Robson. Yeah,
good shout. Okay, mate. Thank you so much, mate. I've loved chatting with you. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, it's been great. I really enjoyed that.
Good, man. You put together an amazing little team together as well. Guys, I mean, if by some miracle you haven't subscribed to the United Stand or any of Mark's channels, because they're all fantastic, go and check them out. We'll put links in the description. Make sure you go subscribe to him. Just amazing content, one of the best on the platform. And if you've enjoyed this video, do a couple of things for me. We're trying to get ourselves to 100k. We're getting pretty close now, so please do consider subscribing if you've enjoyed it. Check out the previous episode with Rory. Hit the like button as well and let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you soon.